The 2026 season is inching closer, and with that, we enter game week. Week 0 is here, and we're going to preview every single game in week 0 at some point this week. Today, we've got 3 games up for you with our more in-depth previews that you'll see and kind of come to understand as we go through them. We've got more fall camp notes, including something we talked about last week. We finally got an answer on the Alabama quarterback situation. We're also going to talk more about the fallout of this ruling from the court in Louisiana, talking a little bit more about NFL players coming back to college football. We'll talk a little bit about that, kind of see where things are, and kind of give further thoughts. I've had a little bit more time to think about it. I want to talk a little more about it. And on top of that, Brent Venables got extended. And that's where we're going to start today, is Brent Venables getting an extension at the University of Oklahoma. Look, he has had a really solid start to his tenure at Oklahoma. I had to kind of pick things up, and obviously when Lincoln Riley left, it was the beginning of the portal era, which kind of was one of the first times that we've seen really just a good portion of a team leave to follow their coach to another school. Like, it's one of the first, at least to my recollection. Now, obviously, there are probably other cases that happened before that, but this was the first one that really stuck out to me. When Brent Venables came in, he had to kind of put the team together in a way that made sense to him, and ultimately did that. It took them a couple years to really get back into the playoff picture, and now here they are, coming off of their first playoff appearance, and going in, or at least their first 12-team playoff appearance, and going into a year where they expect, with a healthy John Mateer, that they could be national championship contenders. Going into this year, it makes sense to just kind of get some things out of the way, and specifically extending Brent Venables 6 years, $10.5 million annually for the next, again, 6 years for Brent Venables. So excited to see what the future holds. I don't think Brent Venables is on the hot seat. I don't think that's going to change anywhere. So I'm just really curious to see what that'll look like and what we can see of the Oklahoma head coach as time goes on. Moving on from that, I want to just very quickly, very briefly talk a little bit about this, and then we're going to go kind of in a back and forth manner between games and some camp intel, okay? So we're going to start, the Louisiana ruling obviously came out last week and allows players, 16 NFL or current guys who have made an NFL preseason roster, to return to college if they so choose. And we're seeing our first one of those possibly right now with tight end Daquan Wright. Was, of course, picked up by the Browns, went through preseason, has been waived. And with him being waived, that all opens up his commitment to LSU and his agreement that if he does not make an NFL roster, he is going to play for LSU this upcoming season. We've seen some other names in that conversation. Of course, Jack Pyburn was a big one, still kind of weighing that option with him. But for Daquan Wright, he's going to return to LSU. And, we've seen some people be a little bit more outspoken on this situation. Dan Lanning has definitely had his thoughts. And I'm going to go ahead and read you a quote from an interview he did the other day. I think there's a lot of negatives that are involved around this. 1, once you go to the NFL, to me, you're in the NFL. You don't get the opportunity to come back. 2, most of us have built our rosters and you have limited roster space now. So if you invited somebody back to your team, that means you're kicking somebody else off your team to match roster limits. I don't think that's fair to the players that worked all summer, all spring, and put themselves in position to be ready to work for a team to have somebody come back. But ultimately, it used to be once you had an agent or once you went and did the combine, all those things qualified as you were no longer an amateur. You're a professional now. Once you declare for the draft. So to let any of those players come back, fair or unfair to them, it's unfair to the sport, and I think it's unfair to the players that are on current teams for those guys to be coming back. For me, I think that it's hard not to feel like this is just a really odd situation and feel like something that hopefully doesn't happen more than once. Now, here's what I will say, and here's where I can kind of sympathize a little bit. A lot of guys declared for the draft or picked up an agent, which they already had from NIL, but went to the NFL for the reason of no longer having eligibility. Of course, the NCAA passed the 5-5 rule earlier this summer. Actually, as a matter of fact, in June. So it did not allow, nobody in the college football ranks knew this was coming. And I think if they did, that might have changed kind of how they went about things. There were obviously some guys who waited it out a little bit. There were some who just went to the NFL because there's obviously a deadline to declare for the draft. And once that rule changed and was not going to retroactively help the class of 2022, some of the players who, of course, were beyond, the limit or were already graduated on to the next phase of life have decided to try to come back. Players like DQ Smith, who has entered the transfer portal from South Carolina and is looking to get that 5th year of eligibility. I understand that some of these players feel a little bit slighted, feel like they missed an opportunity to go pro. But I feel like at the same time, the ones that are on an NFL roster, I agree wholeheartedly with Dan Lanning. Once you're in the NFL, you are in the NFL. There's no coming back. I felt the same way about college basketball when we started seeing this last year with players from the G League dropping back down. I feel the same way right now. I don't care if you make the NFL roster or not. You don't get to come back down to college football. I think it's asinine that this was even ruled for. This has always been the precedent. Once you're in the NFL, you are in the NFL. I find it hard to believe, but once again, I kind of go back to what I said last Thursday. This is what the NCAA has seemingly wanted. They wanted to put out a controversial situation, get a reaction like this, see the courts go against them, and build their case for government to step in and make something happen. I personally am in full disagreement with that. Just have a spine. Look, the NCAA is not as powerless as we all think it is, but they're not giving themselves the opportunity. They're acting like they have no say whatsoever in what's going on, when in reality, I feel like they very well could. The problem is the rules have always been so vague that now that they wrote this 5-5 rule, I would hope that this is judge-proof. I would hope that this is court-proof, and we could go on about our lives and not feel like everything that we do is going, or that we see in the NCAA, we can expect on the back end for it to be overruled by some judge in some random state because some player feels like they've been wronged. The 5-5 rule hopefully is the beginning of the end of this charade that is going on around the sport, where people can just sue left and right and get everything they want. I don't know. I can't guarantee that that's going to be the case, but right now I'm in a very heavy and high hope that that's what we'll see. So with that said, I'm moving on. I'm no longer talking about this until we see players start to fully come back. I'll kind of talk about where they'll land, but otherwise I'm not spending much time on this because it's time to talk week 0. It's time to talk about things that are going to happen on the field. So let's go ahead and do that here in a second. Let's go ahead and get to our first game of the day. And we'll start here with NC State and Virginia. 3:30 p.m. Eastern on Saturday. You can see that game on ESPN. This game was supposed to be played in Brazil. It got moved back to Charlottesville, Virginia. Things didn't work out. They couldn't play in Brazil. Honestly, good. Not because I don't like Brazil. It's a beautiful country. I've seen plenty of pictures. I don't ever intend to travel there. But plenty of pictures. Beautiful place. The reason I say good is because college games belong on college campuses. I don't love the Ireland game. I don't love neutral site rivalry games. And I certainly would not love a conference game in the ACC to be played in some random country. Play it here. Play it on this campus. Scott Stadium is beautiful. And it deserves this game. It's going to be fantastic. You know how I know? Because it was a great game last year. NC State won 35-31, and really the biggest difference maker was one turnover from Virginia last year, an interception thrown in that game. These two teams played incredible games. Virginia, of course, last year's ACC runners-up, and they go into this game as 5.5-point favorites at home. Over-under sits at 53.5. I love what we're going to see from both sides of the ball in this game. CJ Bailey's coming off of one of his best season as a starting quarterback at NC State, and they bring in some wide receivers that I think are going to be a big piece, of course, including JoJo Trader, who I'm excited to see wear the red and black. Now, when you look at Virginia, it's going to be Bo Perbula, and he's going to get his first start for the Cavaliers offense, which you can expect to look very similar to what it was last year. Look, last year they were pretty much kind of high-flying, steady as they go under Chandler Morris as a starting quarterback. Bo Perbula comes in with a lot of experience and a chance to kind of prove a lot of people wrong, a lot of doubters wrong. I'm excited about this game. I think Virginia is still a possible contender. I think they do take some steps backwards, but I still think they're in the conversation. NC State, I've had a lot of people tell me that I've been wrong on them, and I would love to be wrong on them. But the one thing for me with NC State is they just struggled defensively last year. It was one of the worst defensive teams for NC State that I can remember over the last really 7 or 8 years. I mean, this is not your typical NC State team last year. I would like to choose to believe that things will improve this year, that this team will get better, and I would like to choose to believe that this offense can be pretty solid. I think this passing game can be a 250 to 300 yard per game offense, especially if CJ Bailey continues to play the way he has. The run game is going to be one place that I'm a little concerned about. I would love to see just a little bit more, obviously, as time goes on. But I'm very excited to watch this NC State team go through things. Duke Scott's going to be the lead running back, of course, with Davion, I think it's Davion Goss as the backup, of course, transferring in from North Carolina. Just curious to see what will happen. Last year in Virginia, Virginia ran and passed for 257 yards apiece. If they can do that again at home, they're going to win this game. Now, if they can't, if NC State is better defensively, I think NC State's going to win this game. It's the biggest difference in the year that we have coming up, because I really love the additions Virginia has made themselves. All in all, I'm not going to rely too much on what happened last year. I'm going to look at what these two teams are going into this year. And I know that I'm pretty sure that in preview season, I had the pick of Virginia winning the game. I'm going to stand on Virginia winning the game, but I think NC State covers at 5.5. I think it's going to be a really close game. I think it's going to be a lower scoring game than last year, maybe a 28-24 type of victory. But I think that Virginia will get the job done at home over NC State and start 1-0 here in week 0. I'll take this back up here to the solo cam for a minute. And I want to take you back to Thursday. We talked Alabama. And we talked what this team could be. I want to make sure I have the right clip put in here. Again, remember, I am the editor and everything else here. No, I did add the wrong thing. Hang on. Bear with me. I'm glad I didn't do that. All right. I want to go back to Monday. We talked about Alabama starting quarterback job. Here's what we said on Monday. I want to move to Tuscaloosa, Alabama, and talk about the other battles going on around that program. Now, Keelon Rusell has started to kind of stake claim over that starting quarterback spot, and there are talks that maybe he's pulling away a little bit, but it's not a guarantee. Of course, Austin Mack has still been solid, and I would think it really sounds a lot to me like the floor is higher with Austin Mack, but the ceiling is much higher with Keelon Rusell. And with that being said, the ceiling being much higher with Keelon Rusell, the coaching staff believe the same thing. Keelon Rusell was named the starting quarterback, I believe, on Saturday this past weekend. And to be honest, it was what made sense. Keelon Rusell, again, all the camp notes said Keelon Rusell has a higher upside. And we watched time and time again, every single time we'd go through a scrimmage, every single time we'd go through a practice, Keelon Rusell made some mistakes, but the upside was higher. He's able to extend plays in a way that Austin Mack just doesn't do. And that's what won him the starting job. Remember, Austin Mack came over with Kalen DeBoer and was familiar with this system. But Keelon Rusell had a year last year to develop, understand this system, and then have an even playing field for this year's quarterback battle. And it took up until this weekend, but they finally have their answer. It will be Keelon Rusell. Moving on, Tennessee's quarterback battle continues, and it still continues to lead as if it's going to be Faison Brandon. And why wouldn't it be? Faison Brandon is an athlete, and a freak athlete at that, and I've said this multiple times now, but continues to lead every single category. However, he's not leading it by this exponential rate. George McIntyre is right on his heels. And what I'm going to tell you right now is that I would not be surprised to see this battle land and go all the way into that Furman game in week 1. I don't think we're going to get an answer before week 1. I think we're going to go through this entire week. I think we're going to go through and see everybody kind of do their thing there. But beyond that, I don't think we're getting an answer on this quarterback battle anytime soon. Tennessee, I think, is going to, again, land further into the season. One battle that I think is heating up that I don't think we would have expected. Part of this 5-5 rule and part of the court rulings, Thomas Castellanos is coming back to college football, or at least that's the expectation as of right now. And with that said, the Texas Tech quarterback situation might not be as cut and dry as Will Hammond is taking the starting job. Look, Castellanos, of course, last year was a Florida State quarterback and led them to a victory over Alabama. Would fit into this offense, I think, very well, kind of in a way that you would have expected Brennan Sorsby to play in this offense. And thanks to a court ruling, he's been allowed, of course, like most others, to hit the portal for a 1-week period, and he has done just that, entered the transfer portal. And many places are putting Texas Tech as the leader in that field, I guess, for him to land. Now, here's what will be said is that it seems as though right now Texas Tech is going through some compliance things, making sure that what they're doing is going to be deemed legal and it's not going to come back and have any repercussions. Of course, they've had plenty of drama this offseason. But if Thomas Castellanos lands at Texas Tech, lands in Lubbock, Texas Tech just might have that offense they were looking for at the end of the year, or earlier in the spring when they had Brennan Sorsby. Carrying on to Nebraska, they officially named Anthony Colandrea the starting quarterback. Now, that really wasn't too much of a surprise, but TJ Lateef was battling, has looked really solid, looked good last year, too, in his limited playing time. But Anthony Colandrea gets the starting quarterback job. I'm excited to see what that looks like. We'll see him in week 1, of course, as well. Moving back down to week 0 previews and games. Let's talk about the game over in Ireland. I talked about it. I'm not a big fan of the Ireland game, but it is probably the most acceptable, I think, for me as of right now, just because it's at least happened for quite a while. I mean, this dates back all the way to the 90s. But let's talk about it since 2022 for a second. The losers of this game, following the game actually happening, finished the seasons with a record of 17-29. We've seen so much as 2-9 following the game with Florida State just a couple of years ago. The best record was 6-5. Kansas State last year, after losing the game, would go on to be above 500 after coming back from Ireland. The first team to do that since in that previous time span. 17-29. And now it would beg to say, I don't think either of these teams are all that good. TCU, I'm kind of cooling off on a little bit. I'm really not as in on them being a huge contender. However, the schedule is light, and I think the schedule can push them into a point where they're probably 5-3 going into the Texas Tech game. Whereas North Carolina, I've said it multiple times, I'll say it again. I think Bill Belichick gets fired. And if Bill Belichick gets fired, well, then what does that mean North Carolina looks like? Do they win this game and then go on out and lose the rest of the way through and end up, firing Belichick in October, November? Or do they lose this game go out and maybe go 3-9 or 3-8 the rest of the way, and Belichick's fired. I don't know. It really, I have no idea. What I do know is that last year when this game was played in Chapel Hill, TCU absolutely obliterated North Carolina. I mean, it was a laugher from the very beginning. Um, it just, I'm not going to say it's going to be the exact same this year because I really don't agree with that. Both these teams are starting new quarterbacks. Of course, North Carolina, um, going with Billy Edwards. You have TCU, and of course I'm gonna blank here. I knew it was coming. At some point, I was gonna have one of these moments where I would lose something. TCU's gonna have Jaden Craig and the Harvard transfer. TCU goes into this game favored by 7.5, and I think that should tell you everything you need to know about what Vegas believes North Carolina is this year. Because again, TCU I don't think is all that good of a team. I think they're good enough by Big 12 standards. I think they're top half of the Big 12, but I don't think they're really a solid team. The over-under sits at 47.5, which again TCU covered that on their own last year. But I think this is just a different looking game. I think this TCU offense is a little slow firing. I think the North Carolina offense, it's possible they don't even fire at all. And we'll just have to sit here and see what things will look like in this game. I'm very excited about it because, again, I think that North Carolina has this revenge factor on their mind. Even though a good portion of the team is not there, Bobby Petrino gets his first look at him as the coordinator in Bill Belichick's program. We also get a look at TCU replacing an offensive coordinator as well. Remember that Kendall Briles took a job at South Carolina as the offensive coordinator. So we'll have to see kind of just what everything looks like. I don't think change will be aplenty because Sonny Dykes has always kind of been an air raid style offense. I think that he went and hired very similar. Shouldn't expect much different. So what do we expect for the pick in this game? Again, TCU is favored by 7.5. I think TCU is going to win. I think they're going to cover the 7.5. Look, I'm very low on North Carolina. I think there's a lot of problems going on with that program that are beyond what we can even really imagine at the moment. Whereas for TCU, while I don't believe they're going to be all that good, and while I do believe that if things do kind of take a turn for the worse, Sonny Dykes could very well be fired at some point. This team right now just feels like they're really better and more put together at this point. North Carolina, I talked about it last week. The quarterback battle between Billy Edwards and Miles O'Neill was not particularly going great. And in saying that, they made a choice in who should be the starting quarterback simply so they could get a week of practice in. We'll see if it works out. I don't know if it will. I don't know if it won't. I'm not sitting here trying to say that it's going to with certainty be one way or the other. But what I will tell you is that this game is going to be really interesting to watch. I'm looking forward to it, and I'm really looking forward to the fallout and the aftermath of this game on both sides, just to see really what things will look like between TCU and North Carolina. Let's go ahead and go back through some more fall camp notes, and we'll talk a little bit about a couple teams here. Arkansas has officially named KJ Jackson the starting quarterback, and I don't really see any problem with that. Look, Ryan Silverfield goes into year one with, I would say, plenty of expectations, but also just plenty of concerns about the program, plenty of concerns about the team. I've seen myself predict this team to go 2-10. I've seen other people predict this team to be maybe 4-8, 5-7 at the best. But everybody simply agrees that this is a huge undertaking for Ryan Silverfield, to which he's never had to do before. It doesn't mean it can't happen, because it would be silly to believe that it can't happen, that they could be a good team or a bowl team, but I just don't think it will. KJ Jackson was certainly the better option, and certainly we can see how that might go over the course of time. But for right now, all in on what they're doing, and we'll just see where things land. I don't have a real general feel for that right now. We got an Iowa quarterback battle that continues, and hopefully, because I just feel like it's starting to get to that point where we're going to see an answer at some point soon. But Jeremy Hiklinski has really had the better fall camp. And while both quarterbacks had a good spring, and by both, I'm obviously referring to Hank Brown as the other one, both have had a good spring. Both have gone into this fall camp. And it feels like every time Jeremy Hiklinski kind of steps forward, Hank Brown pulls him back in. Now, Hiklinski, of course, was formerly at Wake Forest. Is a little bit better of a passer. I feel like will be a lot more open to this offense because they made a lot of moves this offseason to kind of boost the wide receiver room. I talked about it the other day where I feel like this team is really going to be a lot more dynamic in what they do this year compared to what they've really been over the last 5 to 8 years that we've kind of seen this Iowa offense. Right now, I lean 60-40 that it will be Jeremy Hiklinski. Doesn't mean that's a guarantee. I'm not going to guarantee anything when it comes to this battle because I've seen the wrong decision be made a time or two. But I do think Hiklinski has the step up, has the leg up and the advantage, and we'll kind of just see where things go from there. But Iowa, again, yet to name their starting quarterback. Another team that's yet to name their starting quarterback, even though I think we all kind of have a good feeling where this is going to go, is West Virginia. Look, Rich Rod has been very clear. He's not naming a starting quarterback. He's probably going to wait as long as he can to name a starting quarterback. It's just kind of the way he's always done things. However, I think it's pretty obvious, or it should be pretty obvious, that there's a reason they brought Michael Hawkins into this system. If you watched any old West Virginia team, one thing they had was a mobile quarterback, but one also had a really good arm. And Michael Hawkins has both of those things. Now, a lot of people are going to sit there and doubt that because they've seen his tape from Oklahoma a couple years ago and probably just don't really buy into what he can be. I'm telling you, if you don't think that he can be a really good player in the system, I think you're going to be wrong. Now, I'm not sitting here saying he's going to be Pat White. He's not going to go and match Pat White numbers. He's not going to be Geno Smith either because he doesn't have the arm to be Geno Smith. But he can be a good mix of the two. On top of the fact of the running back room that they have that is filled with a bunch of speed, they love what they're doing on the offensive line. As a matter of fact, Rich Rod made mention that Rick Trickett is one of the best coaches he's ever worked with, if not the best. I can't remember exact wording there, but I'm pretty sure it was the best coach he's ever worked with. This offensive line is going to take a big step forward in year 2 for Rich Rod. The rushing game should also take a big step forward. And this was a team that jumped out and got a few teams last year, including Houston at the end of the year, who ended up being a 10-win team. Imagine if they have the momentum from the very beginning. They start with Coastal Carolina next weekend on September 5th. They'll play Coastal at home. A really good opportunity to prove some things and show that this is a team that is very well capable of going out and winning the Big 12. A starting quarterback hasn't been named yet and probably won't be named between Scotty Fox or Michael Hawkins, but expect that it will be Michael Hawkins Jr. taking the first snaps for the West Virginia Mountaineers in 2026. Now, forgive me because there was one thing in everything that I missed. And still nothing certain about this quarterback battle. So let's just go ahead and take a look and talk Memphis UNLV. Now, this is personally my favorite game of week 0. I guess it's the best game. NC State Virginia is probably close second, but I think this is the best game of week 0. Look, Dan Mullen comes into this year, year 2 at UNLV with a lot of things that he's put together. While we also sit here and talk about Charles Huff coming into his first year at Memphis, but has been really good at Marshall, was really good last year at Southern Miss, put them in the conversation immediately. Left Southern Miss for Memphis because better things came along. And now sits here at Memphis going into game number 1 without still naming a starting quarterback. Now, of course, Memphis is excited for what they're doing. Of course, Marcus Stokes transferred in from West Florida. He's battling Aaron Noland, the former Ohio State and South Carolina quarterback, for a chance to be the starting quarterback this year at Memphis. Pretty excited to kind of see what these two teams will put together. And forgive me, I'm trying to pull up a page here to look at, which, of course, it's difficult. The one thing that does stink about doing these live is every once in a while, I will sit here and find something that I want to talk about, and I don't always, do great with that. But with Memphis, the biggest question for me is going to be just how quick has everybody gelled together. This is a program that has really turned itself on its head after Ryan Silverfield left. Silverfield took a good portion of the roster with him. But with that said, Charles Huff brought a portion of the roster with him. But at the same time, a good majority stayed at Southern Miss with Blake Anderson, who takes over as head coach there. So when I ask these questions, I do ask them genuinely, what does this team look like? Because it is a ton of transfers. As a matter of fact, 20 of 22 projected starters on both sides of the ball for this team are transfers. First-year players in the program. How quick is this team going to mesh and gel together? Because when you look at the other side, you look at UNLV, they're not exactly perfect, but a good portion of the leaders stayed on this team. And then you bring in guys like Jackson Arnold. You bring in Amarion Walker. Defensively, really excited for Cam Santee at Mike to play at the Mike linebacker position. It's a good team that UNLV brings in, and one of the better in terms of returning production. So when you look at things with both of these teams, the momentum really kind of feels like it lands with UNLV right now. This is a team that's also coming off back-to-back 10-win seasons for the first time in school history. They've, as a matter of fact, 2 of their 3 10-win seasons have come over the last 2 years. The final year with Barry Odom, of course, before he left for Purdue, and year 1 of Dan Mullen. UNLV, for me, is turning into one of the most, I guess, consistent programs. A lot of that is thanks to NIL. I think NIL's helped them a lot. But you look at the starting quarterback, it's going to be Jackson Arnold. You look at the backup, Alex Orji, who looked great in a lot of the clips you've seen in fall camp. Now, obviously, the clips that get posted 9 times out of 10 are going to be good clips. You're not going to post clips of your team getting dunked on, of course. However, Alex Orji looks solid. He is still a great runner. I think that dynamic ability with his legs still plays a factor. But this is Jackson Arnold's show, and he's got wheels too. I mean, we saw him play for Auburn last year and had quite a few opportunities to show that off. These are 2 really good teams I'm excited to watch at the group of 6 level, because this could just very well be a matchup that determines a playoff team. I'm not counting Memphis out. I think that at some point they are going to click and get things going. But is it going to happen right away? A 10 p.m. Eastern Time kick on ESPN, of course. In Las Vegas, it feels like this game is just kind of pointing and prodding for that UNLV victory. I wouldn't be surprised if Memphis wins, but I am taking UNLV to win. And to be honest, if I'm going to take a cover, I'm going to take Memphis to cover because I think the game's going to be close. But UNLV could very well win by like a touchdown. That's kind of where I sit with that. And obviously, so does Vegas. So they kind of sit right in the middle. Whenever they sit right in the middle, they usually are pretty confident that the team that they're favoring is going to win. But they're not quite comfortable enough to say a touchdown. They're also not comfortable enough to say just a field goal. So they always put it right in the middle somewhere. And it's always really frustrating because that's one of the tougher games to bet. But UNLV is my pick to win that game on Saturday. So we've rolled through pretty much the majority of what I have for today. And, I really expected to have more to talk about and more to say, but I feel like some of that's going to come over the course of time. Go through some of the rest of the games that are going to happen here on Saturday real quick, just kind of as a full-on preview. Jacksonville State will welcome North Dakota State to the FBS level. North Dakota State at home in this game. It will be in the Fargo Dome, of course. CBS Sports Network will host it 5:30 p.m. Eastern Time. North Dakota State, a 7-point favorite over the Gamecocks of Jacksonville State. As of right now, I am picking North Dakota State to win this game. I just buy into this team a little bit more. I think there's a lot more returning production there. I think North Dakota State wins. Should be a close game. Excited to see what happens there. Just cool to see North Dakota State in the FBS level. Similarly, Eastern Michigan will welcome Sacramento State to the MAC and to the FBS level as well. 6:30 p.m. on ESPN Plus in Rynearson Stadium in Ypsilanti, Michigan. the Eastern Michigan Eagles will host that game. Going in as 10-point favorites. I am picking Eastern Michigan to win because I actually really like EMU as a dark horse in the MAC this year. I think they're going to be a really good team. At 7 p.m. on ACC Network, you'll get Hawaii at Stanford. Stanford 5.5-point favorites. They just named Davis Warren their starting quarterback, so I'm excited to watch how everything goes between these two programs. At 7 p.m. on the CW, you'll see your first look at Florida State. They're 31.5-point favorites over New Mexico State. Really not terribly surprised. And that is your Week 0 slate, of course, with a 10 p.m. game. And forgive me, I messed that up on the graphic. 10 p.m. on Fox for Memphis and UNLV, not ESPN. Apparently, I didn't read that when I was putting it together, so that's my mistake. But we do have... and I missed another one. 3 p.m. on NBC. San Jose State at USC. This is going to be our first look at USC and Lincoln Riley's team this year. Expect to see some big things there. I think USC, they're 38.5-point favorites. I'm going to project them to cover 38.5. So that's what we have for you today. Not as long of an episode as I expected it to be. Now I tend to like to stand between 45 minutes to an hour and a half. But Thursday, we're going to have a big show. We're going to have our Week 0 betting preview. I'm going to go through every single one of my bets, including my preseason bets, my win total bets, to always get lumped into Week 0. It kind of helps me get to 10 for my take 10 every week. So expect to see that coming up here on Thursday as well. We'll have some more conversations. We may even preview another game or two. We may throw Jacksonville State, North Dakota State in there as well. So I'm excited. Been a fun show, a fun day, and I'm excited to come back to you guys Thursday with more here on Armchair Analysis. So appreciate y'all so much. Thank you guys again for making the lead up to the regular season so special. Hopefully we can have a really special season as well. Thank y'all so much for tuning in. Have a great rest of your day, and we'll see you guys Thursday with another episode of Armchair Analysis.